Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I want to speak to you all about the situation that is that is being faced by, I think, every country, but specifically now is being faced by countries in East Asia, Southeast Asia. And what is this problem? This problem is actually the problem of corruption in the government. And I find this very intriguing since, as you know, I've been making a couple of videos speaking on the types of government and types of rules or types of societies that uh, there has been in the world or has been in history. So right now it's very timely that this kind of events are happening right now. And what is happening actually? So to name a few of the countries that are on the world stage right now, on the headlines, one is Nepal, which is really big right now. They recently had their parliament building burned down, and uh, there's crazy protests, crazy riots going against the police shooting one of the students or a couple of students. I'm not too sure on the number count, but I will be showing you guys a video of what's happening there right now. Um, Lots of damage being done to property, not just, I would say, the government property, but other people's property, vandalizing, similar to what happened during the situation in Washington. Um, so that's Nepal. One of the YouTubers I watch, We Hate the Cold, he's a vlogger, traveler, YouTuber, and he showed the real situation of what's happening in Nepal. The second one would be the Philippines. The Philippines right now is facing, well, it has been facing corruption for a very long time, but right now the problem of corruption has seeped through the surface, and I literally mean that, no pun intended. And it's like water, it's like the flood, like the flood can't be controlled anymore, literally and figuratively, because the problem started up with the floods, and people were like questioning why the floods keep happening in the Philippines despite millions, billions of dollars going into flood control projects, flood mitigation measures. And right now the problem
Sa
is
harap po
actually
ng
pretty crazy.
mga pera.
So
Yung half copy po,
now,
si Boss Henry Alcantara
as
po
you can
yan.
see on the
Kung
news, the
maalala ko po,
headlines, it's like people
ako po ang
are
nagpicture
dealing
nito.
with corruption in the high offices, in Congress, in the Senate. Um, lots of nepotism going on in my country, the Philippines, and pretty much, you know, this leads to, again, protests, revolutions. But unlike Nepal, I don't know why the Philippines doesn't take it a step further to make it more lively, more, I would say, engaging, like what Nepal did. On the other hand, you also have Indonesia dealing with its corruption, and I believe the issue there is I would say, if I can remember, the problem that Indonesia is facing is also related to corruption of politicians. I can only remember what it was about. I think the problem of Indonesia is not too sure, but we'll get back to that later. Malaysia, I don't have any notes with me. No notes, nothing. So Malaysia, on the other hand, I I saw a little bit of info about that. I think the protests are usually going on against inflation rates, and the president Ibrahim, something he's not doing that so well on that. Anwar, he's not doing so good on that. But yeah, also Bangladesh is facing corruption protests, and people are not happy over there. So I would say that the problem is getting out of hand. But let me think if I can remember the Indonesian problem. Get back to you. What's up, y'all? So now I remember what happened in Indonesia. They were mad about the people were mad about the subsidies being given to fellow members of parliament. So the I think the leader, the prime minister, gave more subsidies, more money, housing money for their accommodations for the living to members of the parliament, and this was shocking to them because the country itself has, like most developing countries in the world, not enough resources for the people. So they started to protest. So that's namely what started the revolts and protests in Indonesia. So I mentioned around 4 or 5 places. Let's review them: Nepal, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Bangladesh. So that's really what's happening right now in the world. And from what I can see, we are facing the uprooting of oligarchies, nepotism, plutarchies, which is rich, rule of the wealthy. We are facing this sort of, you know, attack from all angles. Uh, I would say the people have been attacked from all angles by the people up there in power, not only through the government style, but through the economic style as well. And I've been researching lots of things about capitalism, socialism, communism. Um, I want to also clearly define and say right here that uh, capitalism, socialism, communism aren't actually the government styles, but more of economic styles, economic theories, and the way of managing money and the flow of production, right? And private and government sectioning of delivery of goods and production of goods and things like that. So, but they do, of course, they're related, of course, related to the government styles, which is how you deal with and manage with the people. So it's very interesting from what I've been researching, the timely events that these things are happening. And, you know, what can I say? I think that specifically people are fed up with what's being fed to them. I think people are, you know, unhappy with how the world is going right now. I think mainly the problem that the people are facing is the greed and the wanton and the lust of the people who are higher up. Particularly, I would say I don't hate capitalism, not yet, but I think capitalism has a big play in this, especially in the Philippines when things are, I think the psychology of the Filipino has been destroyed by capitalism. I can't speak for the others, not yet, and I haven't researched enough. But as a Filipino, understanding and graduating in the Philippines, the value of kapwa, the value of community, the value of kapwa means like you and another person. That intrinsic relationship, like the friend relationship or the neighbor relationship, has been destroyed, I think, by capitalism, in a sense that I have to one up you every single time. I have to earn more than you every single time. I have to be better than you every single time. And when this is related to now money, and nowadays money is the value in which we place, we translate our time and effort. Money is just that. It's just the time, effort, and work of people translated into a money, right? And now, when money is related to all this, to what I just said earlier, it really destroys the value of kapwa. It really destroys the value of, you know, the relationship of sharing, of community, of helping one another, sacrificing, sharing. And I felt this because I grew up outside the Philippines. I understood uh, capitalism, and keeping things to myself was a big problem. I didn't like sharing, and I think that that's wrong. And I think that we should be sharing a little bit more than what we're doing nowadays, and we should be intrinsically having this value of kapwa instilled and taught to everybody, right? Kapwang tao, fellow human. Yeah, fellow is the right word. Fellow human, fellow people. All right. So when we have this problem of, I would say, trying to one up you, trying to capitalize on every situation, especially with those subcontractors and their crazy cars. Like I don't know how many cars you need, man. And you're like out earning Manny Pacquiao. You're out earning. You're out earning over these athletes: Serena Williams, Venus Williams, Lionel Messi, so on and so forth. Jordan, things like this is, I don't think it's right. I think something's clearly wrong, and you gotta be called out, man. You gotta start the protest. You gotta do something. You can't just sit back, lay back, and just like meh, just let it happen. I don't care about politics. Politics is secondary. I want to be a more of a here and now type of person. But the thing is this: this is the problem actually. You signed up. You maybe you didn't sign up. Maybe you're born into it, but you're born into a society, right? And you're a citizen. So you have this unique ability, which was not found in the old days of kings and empires. You have this unique ability to vote. You have this unique ability of social media. Oh, that's another problem of Nepal. Nepal banned all the social medias, right, except TikTok. They gave them like a week to register, and they didn't register. So you see, the problem is, like I said, the problem is you're living in this society. You have all these abilities that you can do. You could vote. You can post on social media. You could speak to people. You have freedom of speech. Well, I don't know if in all countries, but Philippines has for sure. Uh, Nepal has. Nepal has, even with TikTok, they had freedom of speech. And you know what they did? They balled out. They did their thing. They protested. They went against the corruption, man. And I applaud them for that. And other countries, Indonesia, they're protesting. But you see, it's like, does it have to be that bad? Does it have to get that worse? For, you know, like, does it have to get to that point until people start to recognize that they're facing this sort of, you know, insane evil already? You know, it's just like the same thing with dealing with this with an illness. It's like you want to deal with it in stage one or stage four, and I think that the if we keep dealing with things at stage four, our societies are not gonna sustain that. You know, not like the European countries, and they've dealt with multiple stage fours. They've dealt with multiple critical conditions in the past. Look where they are now, right? And I think that uh, according to Carol Quigley's book, um, Tragedy and Hope, which I've been reading up on, the East, namely Asia, specifically developing countries, have not yet gone through those developments in mind, in in spirit, in person, in ideology, in methodology, in practice, in practicality, pragmatisms. They haven't developed all of it yet. I think, and Carl Quigley has this theory that, and he says in his book that the West has already developed their thing, and it was just placed upon the East, and we sort of rushed into it. And I agree because you look at Philippines, no urban planning, crappy structures, crappy situation, confused people. Like, it's just straight up confusion, not knowing, an identity crisis too, which I'll make another video on that. But I think that's not only the Philippines. I think all the countries face this, you know. Or when India was left behind by the UK after their colonial period, their confusion, man. People had to readjust. People had to fix themselves, and which they did. And India has a good military, good government, but still, the place is kind of corrupt, and the environment could do better in India. I'm not here to criticize everything, but I'm just saying what it is. I'm just here to point out what's happening. And if Carol Quigley is right, then it's gonna take a bigger amount of effort from the leaders of the Southeast Asian, East Asian, and Asian countries. Because clearly we haven't developed the right methodologies, even like the way of doing things, uh, like how the West has done. And this has caused us to be confused. This has caused us to become corrupt. This has caused us to also destroy our own virtues. And the East has had our own virtues before. We've had our own thing going on. We've had our own beliefs. We've had our own good things going for us. But because we wanted to adapt and adopt the rich West and their ideologies, methodologies, and practices, this sort of disrupts and speeds up a lot of things. It's like you're teaching a kid how to shoot a basketball, but he can't even stand up yet. This is the sort of thing that Carol Quigley proposes in his book. So you see, if you're not ready, if you're not ready for the thing, you can't do it, man. You just can't do it. Like for example, if you ask me to make this whole thing into a farm, right? I would have no clue, and I would have no equipment, and I wouldn't be ready. It would take me like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, 3 months to actually even start, right? To learn how to make it optimal. And that's my approach, at least, to make it the best as it could be. To learn about the farming, learn about the soil qualities, soil erosion measures, how to make the plants grow, the acidity, blah 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 blah. Environment, humidity, like things like this. But the thing is this: Asia doesn't do that. Asia rushed into the thing. We wanted the people who had the money, who had the wealth. They wanted that thing fast. They wanted to adapt. They wanted to get into the Western life, to the richness. They wanted it quick, and that destroyed everything, or almost everything, that the East had to provide, leaving us in shambles and disarray. You know, when a foreign thing comes into your place, right? It can do two things, I think. One is the hard war, like the physical war, physical invasion. The other one is soft war, soft invasion. And that's where they sort of inch by inch creep into how you do things, change how you do things, change how you see things, you know, damage your way of thinking, your perception, your character, your attitude, you know. And I think that is actually the main issue that we're facing right now with Nepal, with Philippines, is like we've lost our sense of being Eastern. We've lost our sense of being communal. Like we focused, we should be focusing more on the society. We should be focusing more on the people. We shouldn't be focusing on the next iPhone or the next whatever, the next celebrity. Like, who gives a, like, who cares, man? That's not what actually matters, especially not in the East, where traditional values are stronger than the West, due to, I will not expound too much, but due to the roots of the East and the West being different. Just how it is, right? The West has a significant different value system than the East. You know, the West has a system in where they value individuality, right? They value progress and development. And like their forefathers, the Greeks and the Romans, they value accomplishment, right? Especially the American mindset, where if I work hard enough, if I put in enough hours, I can do this. You know, like the Greeks, they would have their moment, they would have their glory and flourishing. They call it eudaimonia, right? To flourish. Achilles, what did he want? He wanted immortality. He had two choices. One was to stay back home and become an old man but not gain glory, or go to Troy and become a hero and gain all the glory, right? So that's the things that he was facing. And what did he pick? He picked glory, right? And the Romans, what did the Romans have? They had the triumph in which you had to be you had to achieve things, usually war. You had to go and get things, success, favor, tributes. You had to bring in a camel or a giraffe from Africa or something like, or exotic humans or exotic fruits. Then you had your triumph. You could parade yourself into the city with your glory. you know and what is so different about the Western culture now? Nothing much, actually. Right? And that's actually the roots of the Western world, in which they have uh, they seek for glory. They seek for flourishing. They seek for success, and that can be good. That doesn't have to be bad, you know. But it's just a different value system than the East. The East, to me, seems more contented with life, and they seek more spiritual and communal aspects. They seek the well-being. They seek the inner soul. They seek mm, the family. They seek the people. They seek the contentment. They seek the you know religious values. Of course, the West has religious values, but it's also different. You know, and you can even see this in Orthodox Christianity, which is Eastern Christianity, and Western Christianity, which is Roman Catholic and Protestant. And you can see the difference, right? Let me put it to you like this. In the East, Eastern Orthodox, Russia, Greece, Constantinople, Africa, uh, the focus is more on being. Okay, I'm back. Sorry for the cut. So basically, the East is focused more on being, and that's being like Jesus, being like Christ, right? That's the whole point of salvation, theosis, and you're trying to be like Jesus, right? And you oppose that to Western Christianity. You have Protestants and Roman Catholics, namely Lutherans, you Anglicans. You have a focus on law. You have a focus on doing. You have a focus on justification. You have a focus on Bible interpretation, and you have a focus more on, I don't know. It's more on, you can tell. I don't know what's the exact word to put it into the exact word. Let me dig through it with you. I think that the main difference is actually you you have this two two halves of Christianity. One looks at the being, one looks at the soul for salvation, and the other one looks for glory. No, not really. It doesn't look for glory per se, but it looks for what's right, and they look for their orthodoxy versus the actual orthodoxy. You know what I mean? They seem to look for what's the right way to do things. To me, that's how I see it, right? They look for, is my interpretation right? Is the Pope right? Uh, does the Bible say this? Or was the salvation justification for salvation? Well, what's the right way of salvation? Seven sacraments. The thing is this: the East also has the Bible. They also have seven sacraments. So they also have priests. Oriental Orthodox has a Pope too, but he's not the supreme ruler. So what's really the difference here? I think the real difference, as you can see, as I put the pieces together, the real difference is actually the spirit behind everything, you know? So I'm not here to make final judgments. You make the judgment yourself. But from what I can see and from what I've been saying the whole time, the Eastern countries are focused on being, right? They're focused on actual essence. They're, and you can see this in the community. In the East, things are more like just how it is. Like it is what it is. Like in terms of there's not so much flamboyancy or cocky braggishness. Of course there is, but it's not in the same level as the West. The West is known for being performers, they're known as entertainers. They're known as um, I would say showmans, you know? They're known as they're known as great inventors, doers of things, right? Athletes, you know, circus shows in Europe. These are the famous things of the West. Whereas the East is not really focused on that. The East is more focused on, uh, I would say, traditional family values, doing the simple things, farming, and you know, somehow things are more peaceful. Somehow things are more simple over here. And playing basketball, I know this very well because you can see very clearly the two ways people are brought up. One kid grows up in the Western style, and the other kid grows up in the Eastern style, right? And they're different styles. That's all I'm saying. Now, maybe my Eastern Christian versus Western Christian analogy was pretty weak, but I think you guys are going to get my point here. And the point is that they're two different styles. They're just two different things, right? The East and the West are just two different things. And right now, with the whole thing that I mentioned, to sum it all up, Carl Quigley and his theories, and all these protests going on in Nepal, Philippines, Indonesia, you know, it's just, I think, showing you what greed and corruption, how it seeps in. I'm not blaming the West, but it's clearly something is not right with the people. Something is not okay with the people. Something is not okay with the people in power. It seems like money, this thing where especially with all these kids flaunting all their wealth, these rich kids of the politicians and leaders. Something is more inclined to the Western mind than the Eastern mind. Something is more inclined to Western glory seeking. It's more focused on triumph of the Romans than the communes of Nepal or the religious life of Nepal or the kapwang tao of Philippines. It's not the same, you know. Something is more inclined to the West than to the East in these politicians and these rich people. So hopefully I got you guys to think a lot about the topic that we're discussing today, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Stay tuned. Peace. Oh, if you want to support, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. See you guys.